This program is brought to you by the partners of A Rood Awakening International. Help others find truth. Support A Rood Awakening International today.
In recent years, a modern miracle has developed. Ancient manuscripts that have been rarely seen or even thought to be lost are being documented online. The problem is there are very few people in the world who can interpret what they mean for both Jews and Gentiles. Nehemia Gordon joins Michael Rood for a rare look at some of the world's revered biblical texts, because it's the end of the sixth day. The sun is set, and this is Shabbat Night Live.
As they take this message out into the world.
Well, Shabbat Shalom, Torah fans. Welcome to Shabbat Night Live with Michael Rood. I'm your host, Scott Laird. And before I reveal this week's co-host, we are into a brand new month on the astronomically and agriculturally corrected biblical Hebrew calendar. This is the first Shabbat in the month of Adar, and that means that next week is Purim. And boy, do we have something fun planned for you. Let's talk about that with my co-host, Chief Operating Officer of A Rood Awakening International, Ted Clayton.
Well, thank you for letting me be here, Scott, and welcome to Shabbat Night Live, everybody. Shabbat Shalom.
Indeed. Now, before we talk about Purim, we want to talk about tonight's episode.
Yes.
Very rare photographs of manuscripts I know I've never seen, you've never seen.
Only seen here.
Only seen here because Nehemia Gordon is one of very few individuals. I think, in fact, he is one of the only individuals, if not the only individual in the world who's seen the entire collection of what he's about to show us tonight.
Yeah.
So let us take a look at what he's going to show you.
Here you go.
I found out that, and I knew about this several years ago when I did the teaching, I found out that there was a database that had been prepared, and the rumors of database were greatly exaggerated. The database was actually a pile of papers this high, handwritten notes by three scholars who spent several years examining the direct images, not just images, sorry, the direct pages of the Aleppo Codex. And I was told by one of those three people who worked on it, he was the one who told me they never erased a vowel or an accent of God's name, of Yud He Vav He. Now, why would he say that? Because it was 40 years ago, he didn't remember. I got my hands on the database. Again, it's a pile of papers this high. And I spent days combing through that data, and there they document every single time someone made a change, and there isn't a page, not a single page of the Aleppo Codex that doesn't have corrections.
All right, so there you go, Nehemia Gordon, world traveler.
Outstanding, ladies and gentlemen. If anyone is going to make things crystal clear, it's going to be Nehemia Gordon and Michael Rood together.
That's right, and Nehemia is just, the access he has given to some of these things is unbelievable.
Well, it's uncanny, and even going and seeing the Vatican junk boxes we've seen in the past, you know, to be able to go in and see these things. Nehemia is such a scholar, and as Michael has said many times, he's one of the very few biblical scholars that he actually trusts on this stuff.
Indeed, and that's because Nehemia appreciates, he's not like most folks maybe on the other side of things that sees the New Testament as that's junk, the Christians are crazy, I don't want nothing to do with it.
Right.
He says, no, let's hear it out, let's see what's in here. So he is a Karaite Jew.
Yes.
And he goes, what that means is he goes strictly by the Bible.
Right.
All of the extraneous things like boiling a kid in its mother's milk, for example. Let's bring that out. So, so that is a Bible verse, and essentially it relates to a pagan practice of the day. When they would literally take a baby goat and boil it in its mother's milk, and it was considered a delicacy in pagan practices, but pagan circles, that is. But Nehemia says, well, that may be, but that was no reason for the Jews of today to say that we must have separate kitchens in our synagogues.
Right.
One for meat, one for milk. And he says that is absolutely not true. That's not what this verse means. Right. And so as a Karaite Jew, that is his mantra. He goes forth and he wants to reverse all of the traditions of man that have been put on the Jewish people, which in fact one of his relatives was instrumental in several generations ago. Yes. And he feels this is his job from Yehovah to go in and reverse that wrong as he sees it. He wants to clear the path and let his Jewish brethren see that. And in so doing, he brings a great perspective for Christians and Messianic folks as well.
Well, so ladies and gentlemen, you want to call your neighbors, your friends, your family members, and have them tune in right now to Shabbat Night Live, because no one's going to want to miss this special teaching from Michael and Nehemia tonight.
Now, special teaching next week. Boy, have we got something all week long.
Wow.
Not just Shabbat Night Live, all week. So, Ted, what is this thing we have devised here?
Next week, as everyone knows, in the future coming days, we'll have Purim. And Michael has suggested that we take out of the archives The Making of the King's Bride, a special teaching Michael did on Purim. And ladies and gentlemen, that is going to air is it this coming week?
Next week, yeah, next week.
Next week, ladies and gentlemen, every night at 8 p.m., a special Making of the King's Bride will be airing every night, so you don't want to miss it. Call your friends again and your neighbors, because the Making of the King's Bride, the special Michael Rood teaching on Purim, will be happening all that week, and you're not going to want to miss one single episode.
That's right. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, there are 4 episodes.
Right.
And then we're going to do a marathon at Shabbat Night Live.
We're going to do a marathon on Shabbat Night Live starting at 8 o'clock, and you can binge watch all 4 of the episodes there. So, ladies and gentlemen, don't miss it.
That's right. We're going Netflix style. We're just
going to
binge watch the whole thing.
There you go.
Get it all done in one night. It's a great set of episodes. Now, before us here, people might say, what is this thing in front of you? Okay, so first of all, this is all about the February Love Gift.
Yes.
It's been going on for a couple of weeks. You haven't seen it yet. Mm-hmm. You need to get in on it. It's the second Sabbath with Michael Rood. One of the, this is where one of, where you get into it. You've seen the verse in the Bible several times. You sort of skip over it. You
think it's not an important verse.
Thank you. Yes, you don't think it's an important verse, but it is. And Michael says in the second Sabbath, Michael explains a confusing incident in the Bible that, with proper understanding, unlocks the timing of Yeshua's 70-week ministry.
So if you want to know what verse we're talking about, you need to give a donation of $50. Get this special teaching, the second Sabbath. It is fantastic.
Right. Now, folks say, well, why is it $50? All the other DVDs are like $20 for a single DVD. This is not a purchase. This is a gift from Michael.
Yes.
For your donation of $50, Michael says, I want to give you something back, because not everybody does that. I want to do that. Thank you for donating to this ministry. He wants to give you this. And in fact, he says, if people want to give more than that, I want to give them more back. So we said, Michael, what do you want? He says, give them something special for $100. So I said, okay. So you're also going to get the teaching, and you're also going to get this doormat. A shalom doormat. Ever seen this thing before? I've never seen anything like this. So you can welcome folks into your home with the Hebrew greeting shalom, and it's a heavy rubber. This is actually a very heavy thing.
Yeah, and it's wonderful to express the word shalom as people walk into your home, because what you're saying to folks as they walk in is, welcome to the home of peace.
Yes, indeed. Peace to your home. So that, and peace to you when you come in.
That's right.
This is for a gift of $100. And if you want to give even more, like Michael says, give them even more. So, okay, we're going to give you even more. So this is a beautiful tapestry. I know, Ted, you are a fan of this.
I am. I'm a huge fan of this. First of all, it has a wonderful pocket here for a rod, so that this is actually a hanging tapestry. The material inside this tapestry is just as though you went to the Middle East and gotten one of those expensive multi-thousand million dollar tapestries there. It is just really good quality material stuff. And Scott, tell us about what's inside.
Well, we have 3 depictions here of Moses over here, Elijah in the middle, and Aaron on your end. Mm-hmm. Bible verses about each one of them down below. And at the top, you'll notice some Hebrew writing, and that's the Shema.
Yes.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. That's what it says at the top. And underneath is the English, Hear Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. And so it's a beautiful tapestry, and you'll get that for a donation of $300 or more. And that is Michael's way of saying thank you for donating to this ministry, and thank you, Ted. All right. So Nehemia Gordon joins Michael Rood for a rare look at some of the world's revered biblical texts. But first, let's get to your bread and wine with the Kiddush. Get ready. Here comes Michael.
If you read the Bible on a regular basis, you have experienced it. The passage you've dismissed a dozen times suddenly jumps out and becomes the key to understanding everything.
Most of your Bibles will say it was on another Sabbath because the second Sabbath after the first doesn't make any sense. Unless you're living in a biblical culture.
The Second Sabbath by Michael Rood reveals the gravity of what Yeshua did and, more importantly, why he did it. But the only way to watch it is to receive it as our gift. Donate a $50 love gift and we'll send you The Second Sabbath on DVD or Blu-ray. Or donate $100 to receive the teaching plus a unique welcome mat with the Hebrew greeting, Shalom. Or donate $300 to receive everything plus a 32-inch tapestry featuring depictions of Moses, Aaron, and Elijah. Hurry, offer ends February 28th. Call the number on your screen or get your gifts online at monthlylovegift.com.
When the resurrected saints are gathered together on the sea of fire and glass for the 10 days of awe, the 10 days of inspection, and then getting dressed for the marriage supper of the Lamb, we wait to hear if our name is called into the marriage supper of the Lamb, into the Mishkan in heaven, where Yeshua will sit at the head of the table, where, as John says, he sees the Ark of the Covenant, the throne of Yeshua, and he is sitting on it. And we go into the marriage supper of the Lamb, and this is when Yeshua's promise is finally fulfilled. He told his disciples on the night of the Last Supper, when he blessed the Most High with the prayer of the Melech Tzedek, Baruch atah Yehovah, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. He said, this is my body which is broken for you. I am your provision. By my stripes you will be healed. And then Yeshua, as he took his cup and he passed it around to his disciples, he said, I will not drink this again till I drink it with you in my Father's kingdom. The marriage supper of the Lamb, Yeshua will take his cup and he will say again, this represented and still represents the renewing of the covenant that offered to make you priests and kings. I paid the death penalty. I paid the price for the broken covenant. And now you get to drink with me in my Father's kingdom. You are the ones that are going to live and reign with me upon the earth for 1,000 years because I paid the price. Until the marriage supper of the Lamb, we do this in remembrance of him. Shabbat Shalom. It is a privilege for us to have back in the Shabbat Night Live studio, Nehemia Gordon, who for the last year has been traveling the world, and because of the resources that are coming into the Makor Hebrew Foundation, which is Nehemia Gordon's 501c3 nonprofit organization, it has enabled him to travel the world and to be able to go into places, purchase the equipment, and go into places for the cutting edge in biblical research into the ancient Hebrew manuscripts. And Nehemia is back with us because he has such a treasure trove to share with us. Nehemia, thanks for coming back. Take it away.
Michael, thanks for having me back. You know, for the last few years, I've been studying Hebrew manuscripts. Really, for decades, I've been studying Hebrew manuscripts, but it's gone into overdrive in the last few years as there's been a worldwide drive to digitize Hebrew manuscripts and make them available online. Mm-hmm. And so really, for the last 3 or 4 years, I've been going through these manuscripts, studying the name of Yehovah, looking for the name with full vowels. Today we have it over 2,400 manuscripts with those full vowels.
Over 2,400.
Over 2,400.
Every time you come back, every time I hear, it's more that your team is working on.
We're pushing 2,500. I came to a certain impasse in my research, and the impasse was that there were certain things I couldn't know without examining the manuscripts directly, not just from high-resolution color photographs.
And that's why you've had to travel the world.
I have traveled, and actually, let me show people up here on the screen. This is me at the Vatican. It says up there, Biblioteca Apostolica Vaticana. One of my dreams for years has been to get into the Vatican, to see their manuscripts, and it was not easy. I had to go jump through many hoops. They don't let just anybody in there. It's actually a big deal to be let in there, and they finally let me in. Boy, it was good timing, because if I tried to get in now, they're closed because of the virus. But back last summer, I was able to get in there, and I was able to see things I had studied 20 years before, things I had seen. Like there was a Vatican manuscript of the Gospel of Matthew, of Shem Tov's Hebrew Matthew. I talk about how there's 28 manuscripts of Shem Tov's Hebrew Matthew. Most of those manuscripts of Shem Tov's Hebrew Matthew are actually a section within a larger book that written by this rabbi named Shem Tov ibn Shaprut in 1380, and the larger book is called Even Bochan, the test stone. And then as section 12, and sometimes as section 13, because there's different orderings, he includes the Gospel of Matthew as a sort of appendix. The Vatican Library has a manuscript of Hebrew Matthew, which isn't part of Shem Tov's book. It's a standalone Hebrew Matthew. It's the same text as Hebrew Matthew, but it is a standalone text. And I wanted to verify that, because it was a little bit difficult to be sure about this from the what I had up until then, which was black and white microfilms, and eventually it was digitized, but still there are things you could only know, and if you see it with your own eyes, once you get your hands on the manuscripts. At the Vatican, Michael, I was like a kid in the candy store. I was able to see the Shem Tov's Hebrew Matthew. I was able to see two of the oldest Torah scrolls that have survived. They were quite annoyed with me, because normally what they do is they sit you up on this little manuscript reader, and there's like 3 people on the desk. And here I'm saying, well, I need more room for the Torah scroll. I need the entire table. But that's what I needed. And I was able to see things in those Torah scrolls that I would never have known from the photographs. And so it really opened my eyes to many things. Michael, I spent 2 weeks at Oxford University, where I did a seminar, workshop in biblical Hebrew manuscripts with the top people in the world. During those 2 weeks, I got my hands on more Hebrew manuscripts than most scholars will ever get their hands on in their entire careers, and certainly more than I'd ever gotten my hands on.
That's in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks, I handled something in the neighborhood of 200 manuscripts. I don't mean photographs. I mean actually handling the manuscripts, things I had learned about and heard about and read about. And I thought, well, how would I ever know what that is? Right? You're talking to me about, the flesh side and the hair side. How could you tell the difference? Well, once you've handled 200 manuscripts, you can generally tell the difference. So I learned a great deal over the last year. I would even venture to say I've learned more over the last year about Hebrew manuscripts than I learned up until that point in my entire life. Very eye-opening. It was a real blessing. And boy, the timing was amazing, because like I said, if I tried to do it this year, those places are closed. I got to go to Oxford. I got to go to Cambridge. And to see the libraries. I went in to see this one set of scrolls. There were 3 scrolls at this one little library in Cambridge. It wasn't the main library. And one of the scrolls hadn't been opened in decades, and they had kept it in a tin can, and they weren't able to get the tin can open. And they eventually had to saw it open or something. I'm not sure. But they told me, come back in 2 weeks, and by then we'll get it out. We'll have a special conservator open it up. Every place I went, Michael, incredible things happened. It was just a series of miracles.
So did you kill 2 weeks of time and stay, or what?
I had plenty of other things to do. I went to other places and then came back to Cambridge.
Okay.
I went to Berlin.
Did you get to see it then?
I did, absolutely.
So they opened that old rusty can, huh?
They opened the rusty tin can, and when they took out the Torah, when we took out the Torah scroll, there was literally piles of rust that came out with it. And I'm not exaggerating, they had to go get a vacuum cleaner because they didn't want to damage the manuscript, this Torah scroll, by the rust sliding across it. So they were trying to remove it, by bringing it up with a vacuum. It was an incredible experience, Michael. It was a huge blessing, a huge opportunity. Yehovah really blessed me. just to give you an idea of how unexpected some of the things are once you get your hands on them, I want to show here, this is from the British Library. And this is a scroll of the Book of Esther. And I had seen photographs of the text, and I had been studying the text. And I thought, why are these images so blurry? Whoever photographed this must have done a horrible job. And I get to the British Library in London, and I order this manuscript. And it's smaller than, well, it's the size of my pinky, actually, but I have a long pinky. You can see there in inches. It's a tiny little scroll. And it's the type of thing you would never know if you just looked at the photographs online. And certainly if you read other people's transcription of this, you would never know the character of this scroll. This actually applied to something from the New Testament. Michael, here I am posing with Sloane 237, which is a manuscript in the British Library, which has the Book of Revelation, or part of the Book of Revelation, with vowels. And I go there, and I was shocked to see it was something that you could fit in a pocket. I had no idea. I thought this was a giant tome that would fill an entire table. And it turned out it was literally something that would fit in a pocket. And there were actually quite a lot of manuscripts like that I was very surprised to discover. It was a huge blessing, Michael, this entire experience. One of the places I got to go, this is actually a photo of a papyrus. I've actually shared this papyrus before. This isn't new. One of the things I'll hear from people is, well, in the Greek sources, God's name is written Yahweh. Okay. Whether that's true or not is a different discussion. But I found that there was a Greek papyrus where it has the name of God in Hebrew, written in Greek letters, and it says there Yehoah. Yehoah sounds awfully like Yehovah. Mm-hmm. They were writing the vowels out as Yehoah. Now, I knew about this. This one's at the British Library, papyrus number 121. And I knew about this other one, which is a papyrus in... it's located in Berlin. And so when I went to Berlin, I was actually able, they didn't let me handle the papyrus, but I was able to photograph it. And maybe you can see there, it has iota, epsilon, omega, alpha. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so people can hopefully see it. It says there, Yehoah, just like in the one in the British Library. Now, I'm not saying this proves Yehovah's name is Yehovah. That is the pronunciation. I'm saying you have lots of different variations in the Greek manuscripts. One person counted them as 33 different variations. And you can't just say, well, we have Yahweh in the Greek. No, we have lots of things in the Greek because the Greeks didn't know how to pronounce the name. And they had heard Jews saying different things. Maybe they had misheard certain things. And in this case, in this papyrus, they write it as Yehoah. And the story of me getting this photo, Michael, is kind of incredible. So they had on display in Berlin at this museum. It's called the New Museum, the Neues Museum. At the New Museum, they have the head of Nefertiti, which the Germans stole from Egypt. Okay. And it's the centerpiece of their museum. Mm-hmm. And they have guards all over the place so that you do not take a photo of the bust of Nefertiti. And why is that? Presumably it's because they want to sell photographs themselves.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, fine. So this manuscript, this Greek manuscript, papyrus with Yehoah in Greek, is actually in the room next to the Nefertiti exhibit. And they have 5 or so papyruses, and they're stacked one on top of another. And if you press a button, one of them slides out, stays there for a few seconds, and then slides back in. And the reason they do that is they don't want it to be constantly exposed to the light. Okay. So this limits the light exposure. So I see this, and I'm like, this is a manuscript. I wrote to the library and asked them for a photograph, a color photograph, and they never responded at the New Museum. And there I am standing over it, and there's guards everywhere to make sure you don't take photos. But I somehow miraculously was able to get this photo. So you can see there in black and brown where it says Yehoah in the Greek. And this is the type of thing where I want to see it with my own eyes, because until you see it with your own eyes, you don't really know what you're dealing with. Here I am, Michael, at a place in London. Having the opportunity to go into this place was one of the greatest blessings of my life. It's called the Memorial Scrolls Trust. The Memorial Scrolls Trust originally was part of the Westminster Synagogue in London. And after the Holocaust, there were 1,564 Torah scrolls that eventually arrived in London at the Memorial Scrolls Trust. There are synagogues around the world, Michael, who will tell you we have a Torah scroll from the Holocaust. 9.5 times out of 10, that means they have a scroll from the Memorial Scrolls Trust. Almost all the Torah scrolls from the Holocaust originated in London at this one place. And out of the 1,564 scrolls, only 150 remained at the headquarters. And those were the 150 oldest scrolls, which were in the worst condition. Some of them were waterlogged. What happened is on Kristallnacht, the Nazis burned the Jewish synagogues in Bohemia and Moravia, which is today the Czech Republic. Somebody came and put out the fire, and the Torah scroll was salvaged from the fire. And many of the ones I looked at there were salvaged from this fire. You could see where they were damaged by water, damaged by age. One of the great surprises to me within this collection, I looked at 101 Torah scrolls in their collection. I opened them up and examined them. I had to get special permission. It was a whole process. One of them, or two of them actually, weren't Torah scrolls. They were scrolls of the Haftarah. That is the prophets portion. And here is a scroll of the prophets. And there you can see, this is the Haftarah, the prophets portion read on the festival of Shmini Atzeret, what you refer to as the last great day. It's 1 Kings chapter 8. That is the 8th day of Sukkot. And it's the prayer of Solomon. And it says, and it came to pass when Solomon finished to pray, El Yehovah. And there Yehovah is written with the full vowels.
Yeah.
Right there in the center of the photograph. I'll make it a little bit bigger. You can see it there. Yehovah with the full vowels in a scroll, which is extremely unusual. Normally we'll find this, I can't even say 9 times out of 10. 99.99999 times out of 100, we're finding this in codexes, which are book form. Here is the name Yehovah actually written by hand in a scroll. Extremely rare. I found 2 scrolls like that of the Haftarah in the Memorial Scrolls Trust. One of the reasons it's so rare is normally the Haftarah is printed. It's not written out in a scroll, but in 2 of them it was written out on a scroll. Michael, this is one of the highlights of my life right here, this photograph. I know I look very serious, but here I am sitting in St. Petersburg, Russia, in front of the Leningrad Codex, the famed Leningrad Codex. During my travels for about a 6 or 7 months period, I had the opportunity, Michael, to examine not only the Leningrad Codex, but the Aleppo Codex, the Damascus Crown, and Sassoon 1053. The 6 key manuscripts of the Tanakh. There are 6 key manuscripts. There's 2 I haven't examined yet. One of them I was hoping to examine this spring, but then COVID-19 hit, and I wasn't able to do it. That's the one in the British Library, Oriental 4445. The 6th manuscript, it's unknown exactly where it is, so I don't know that I'll ever be able to. I'm not saying this to brag. Quite the contrary. I'm humbled that I am currently the only living person, as far as I know, only living scholar for sure, to have studied and examined directly and physically 4 of the 6 surviving key manuscripts of the Tanakh. Now, there are scholars who have examined 3 of them, but nobody else, scholars who have examined 2 of them. I don't know of any other scholars who have examined 3, let alone 4.
You talked about this on Shavuot, but we didn't have the photograph at that point.
We didn't have the photograph.
And that's incredible. That is the manuscript
That's
itself
the
sitting
Codex.
right there in front of you that you don't get to see. And
Michael, I went to St. Petersburg, Russia, and they told me, don't let anyone think they can come because you came and saw it. Anybody else who comes, we won't let them see it. It's a very rare thing for us to let anyone see it. I met with one woman who had been coming to the library for 10 years every summer. And I asked, have you seen the Leningrad Codex? She said, no, they'll never let me see it. And I thought, I'm not going to get to see it. I went there to see other things as well. So it wasn't the only thing I was there for. But in the second to last day, they brought it out and they let me spend 5 hours examining it with a microscope. These 4 manuscripts I just talked about, the Leningrad Codex, Aleppo Codex, Damascus Crown, Sassoon 1053, I examined them with a microscope using ultraviolet and infrared as well as visible light. Just to be able to examine them with this microscope, Michael, is a miracle. I was at this conference in Oxford at the workshop, and I was explaining to one of the professors there what I was trying to research, and she said, "Oh, you should ask this person in Berlin. She's examined this Torah scroll at the State Library of Berlin." So I write to the woman, and she says, "Well, we examined it, but now what you're asking about something very specific." She said, "Let's write a proposal and see if they'll let us come and examine it." I couldn't believe it. If I had to pay for this through my ministry, we couldn't afford to have this type of research done. The woman brought in a $50,000 what's called X-ray fluorescence device. It was operated by somebody who's authorized to work in nuclear power plants because it's putting out X-rays. It's radiation. He's a radiation specialist or radiation security safety specialist. So while we're examining this, she shows me there's this other tool that doesn't cost $50,000. It's much simpler. You can stick it in your pocket, and you can examine things. Basically, it's a microscope that has ultraviolet and infrared. I said, "Okay, but I need this little piece that attaches to it. Where can I buy that?" She said, "You can't buy that." I said, "Where do I get it?" She says, "If I deem you worthy, I'll give you one." She designed it herself. I was deemed worthy in the end. And I was able to then travel all over Europe and use this device. I want to show you some examples of things. And again, this is why it's so important to study the manuscript directly if you can. So this is the Leningrad Codex. I didn't take this photo. This is a photo that's published online. It's a photo that was taken in the 1990s. And here we have, on the second line, the second word from the right, it says Yehovah. And it looks like it has the full vowels. Michael, I went through every single instance in the Leningrad Codex, in the Aleppo Codex, in Sassoon 1053. I didn't go through everyone in the Damascus Crown because there's too many, but I went through a couple dozen in the Damascus Crown, and I examined them under the microscope. In this case, I didn't even need the microscope. We take out that page from the Codex, of the Leningrad Codex. You saw it was a stack of pages, right? But you have to they're actually in little folders called quires. In this case, the quires were originally sewn together. They've now been disassembled by and large. So we take out that section, and I immediately see that dot, which I thought might be a cholam. I wasn't sure. I put this with a question mark. That dot only appears on this photograph, not in real life.
Really?
Yeah.
Only on the photograph.
The photograph from the 1990s had some piece of schmutz on it. Maybe it was on the lens of the camera. I have no idea. I take this out and I don't understand. I'm looking at this and there's nothing there. Now, in other instances, I look at the dot and I say, hey, that's not a dot of ink. That's a freckle on the animal. In this case, there wasn't even a freckle on the animal. Not only is it not ink, there's actually nothing there. That is a phantom dot over God's name. And you would think I'd be upset because I'm trying to verify that God's name is Yehovah, and here it's not. Here it's missing the vowel. I was so happy because we'd found truth. And there was another 30 or 40 places where it did have the full vowels. Yehovah, and that's verified. I can't say what manuscript this is, but it's a manuscript where it has the full vowels. I just want you to understand what I was talking about with the ultraviolet and infrared. So here it's plain to the eye that this is Yehovah with the full vowels, but this is what it looks like under the microscope. You can see some of the hairs on the animal, like some of the actual fibers of, not fibers, but tissues of the animal. And there's no question whatsoever, this is Yehovah with the full vowels. There's actually 3 dots there. The 2 on the left are an accent mark. And the one to the right is the vowel O, which spells out the name Yehovah. I've talked about this at length in other contexts. I'm not going to go into it now. This is what it looks like in ultraviolet. In this case, that didn't really add much, but there are places where things have been erased, and you can read them using ultraviolet. which you can't read with the naked eye, or it's very difficult to read. With the naked eye, someone would say, well, I'm not sure that's what it is. That's your opinion. Ultraviolet removes that. It's a fact. Everybody can see it. Michael, I found places in the Aleppo Codex where the name was written Yehovah with the full vowels, and someone came along and erased the O. No one was more shocked about this than I was. Now, I did a teaching a few years ago. I went to Israel, and I met with the top expert in the world. I should say he was the top expert in the world in the 1980s, one of the top experts anyway, of the Aleppo Codex. He spent years studying the photographs of the Aleppo Codex. And I asked him about the places where, in my view, the scribe had accidentally put in the cholam and gave us the full vowels. Just to back up, in most instances in the Aleppo Codex, in 5 of the 6 key manuscripts, God's name is written Yehovah, and there's a missing vowel. And then I found in about 50 places in the Leningrad, in Sassoon 1053, in the Aleppo. Damascus Crown's an exception, because in Damascus Crown, it's over 1,000 places, right? So there you can't say it's an accident. There the scribe intentionally put in the cholam. No question about it. It's an exception when he doesn't put in the cholam, when he doesn't spell it Yehovah with the full vowels. But in the other 5 of the other 6, it's very rare where every once in a while the scribe puts in the full vowels. And my suggestion has been for years that the scribe accidentally put it in because he knew that's how it's pronounced, and in his head he was pronouncing it, so he put in the O. So I asked this man a few years ago, who was one of the great experts of the Aleppo Codex, and he said, well, from what he remembers working in the 70s and 80s with the actual, not photographs, but with the actual codex, what he remembers is they never erased a single vowel or a single accent of the name. And I said, that solves it. They accidentally put in the O, and then they weren't allowed to erase it. And one of the purposes of my research, Michael, was to verify him, was to prove him right. And I said that in a study I did on my website on nehemiaswall.com. I said, I'm basing this on what the information given to me, but I wish I could see it for myself. Michael, now I've seen it for myself. I spent 9 hours examining the Aleppo Codex. I checked every single place where it has full vowels, and I found not only did they erase vowels in some instances, in other words, it said Yehovah with the O, and somebody came along and erased the O, because that was the standard way of writing it without the O. So they erased the O. Not only did they erase the accents, not only did they erase the vowels, I found 5 places where they erased the actual letters Yud, He, Vav, He. In many of those, some of those places where they erased Yud, He, Vav, He, they replaced it with Adonai. And maybe we'll talk about that next time. That's a whole topic unto itself. So I want to save that. But what I had said before was based on the information I was given. And I even said at the time in the study I put on my website, I wish I could see it for myself. And now I've seen it for myself, not only with the naked eye, but with ultraviolet and infrared. This is the ultraviolet. This is what the infrared looks like. There's details you can make out. Like, for example, with this infrared and the ultraviolet, I could tell you if that's a freckle on the animal or an actual cholam, an actual dot of ink. Actually, in this case, I could see it even with the naked eye with the, it's a very high resolution photograph. But here with the microscope, it's definitive, that's ink. So here's the point. There were places they wrote Yehovah with the full vowels, and they took out that vowel they were supposed to hide. So why then did they leave it in a number of instances, approximately 7 instances? Why did they leave it in? So there's a few possibilities. One is they left it in because it didn't bother them too much. But then why erase it in that other place? So probably what happened is they missed it. And people will say to me, how could they have missed it in the Aleppo Codex? Nehemia, in your own book, Shattering the Conspiracy of Silence, you quoted the professor who said it's as if an angel wrote it. Okay. I know information I didn't have at the time. When I wrote Shattering the Conspiracy of Silence, I didn't know that on every single page, and mark my words, every single page of the Aleppo Codex, someone came along, and we know who it was. It was Aaron ben Asher. In most cases, sometimes it was a man named Shlomo ben Buya'a, and the 2 original scribes who worked on it together, or as partners, in a sense, and they scratched off mistakes and replaced them with the correction. Every single page has things like that, and they did it not only with regular words, they did it with the name Yehovah itself.
And this is something you couldn't see without direct examination with the microscopic?
So to be fair, before I examined it directly, I found out that, and I knew about this several years ago when I did the teaching, I found out that there was a database that had been prepared, and the rumors of database were greatly exaggerated. The database was actually a pile of papers this high, handwritten notes by 3 scholars who spent several years examining the direct images, not just images, the direct pages of the Aleppo Codex. And I was told by one of those 3 people who worked on it, he was the one who told me they never erased a vowel or an accent of God's name, of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Now, why would he say that? Because it was 40 years ago, he didn't remember. I got my hands on the database. Again, it's a pile of papers this high. And I spent days combing through that data. And there they document every single time someone made a change. And there isn't a page, not a single page of the Aleppo Codex that doesn't have corrections. And that actually makes sense. Maimonides, the great rabbi of the 12th century in Cairo, he mentions the Aleppo Codex. It wasn't called the Aleppo Codex then. It was called the Manuscript of the 24 Books, meaning of the Tanakh, here in Cairo. And he says, Ben Asher proofread it many times for many years. When you proof something, you find mistakes.
Right.
And so what Maimonides said in the 12th century, we can now verify 100%. So the reason I asked to get direct access to the Aleppo Codex is I now had a tool that these scholars in the 70s and 80s didn't have. They didn't have a handheld microscope with a special base that has ultraviolet and infrared. Michael, it was an incredible experience. I was so blessed. There were things there that I would have never imagined that I discovered looking at it, first of all, directly with the naked eye, but then with the microscope, just incredible revelations. I want to show you something from another manuscript. Again, I'm not going to say which manuscript. It's a bit complicated. But here we have an instance where if you look in the bottom right, you see below the word, you see some dots and you see a dash in the second and third letter from the right. And the parchment around them looks kind of weird. Mm-hmm. And the reason it looks weird is someone took a razor, scratched the vowels off from below those 2 letters, and put in 2 different vowels. And up until I went to examine this manuscript, there was a debate between the 2 top scholars in the world who are Hebrew linguists. And the debate was about whether this was a correction by a second scribe or whether the parchment was damaged during preparation when it was made. And this is a photograph through a microscope, the 50X microscope that I have. And there's no question that this was a correction. Someone scratched off the 2 letters, the 2 vowels, and replaced it with 2 different vowels. Why did they do that? Because the original vowels written by the original scribe were contrary to what people thought were the rules of Hebrew grammar. Now let's put this in perspective. When we talk about the rules of English grammar, we open up our English grammar and it tells us what the rules are. So the grammar we use today for English is proscriptive. It's a prescription. This is what you should use. Prescriptive. It's a prescription. This is what you should use. But the grammars of ancient languages are descriptive. They don't tell you what it's supposed to be. They tell you what we find de facto in the manuscripts, in the sources, in the texts. And so the grammars that had been written had a rule that you can't, those two dots at the bottom that are one on top of the other, it's called a shva. The rule was you can't have 3 shvas in a row. And lo and behold, in this manuscript, in another place, there were 3 shvas in a row. And the debate was about this place. Were there originally 3 shvas in a row? Or that's just some damage to the manuscript. It's not a correction. And there's 2 shvas in a row, and they're broken up by a what's called a patach, that little line. And examining under the microscope, I was able to put that debate to rest. It is now definitive. I'm going to zoom in here and show you. You can see as clear as day, once you understand what you're looking at, that originally there were 3 of these shvas in a row, and one of them was scratched off and replaced with that line, which is the patach. So this is really important. People will say, well, the rules of Hebrew grammar. What are those rules based on? They're based on manuscripts. What if those manuscripts have been changed? We can actually now go and examine manuscripts and determine if they were changed and how. So the big question I had going to St. Petersburg, Russia, was as follows. I wanted to know, when the cholam was put there, there's usually a missing vowel in the name Yehovah to make it unpronounceable, but in about 50 places the cholam was put there. Was that done by a later scribe? And I'll be honest with you, Michael, I was a little bit nervous, but I wanted to know the truth. I considered it a distinct possibility that I would get there, look with my microscope, particularly in the infrared. With the infrared, it just opens up your eyes, and you can tell if it's a later ink or the original ink. So I got there, and I was a bit nervous, and for 2 weeks I'm begging them to let me see the Leningrad Codex, because I want to know in those 50 or so places where it has the full vowels Yehovah, is that the original scribe, Shmuel ben Yaakov, in the year 1008, or is it some later scribe who maybe came along 500 years earlier and added the O? And I was nervous, but I prayed. I said, Yehovah, whatever the answer is, I want to know the answer, and I will accept it. And I got the microscope, and I sat there for 5 hours going through each instance. And in almost every instance, the vowel is the original cholam, written by the scribe who used a different type of ink than the. And let me back up here. The Leningrad Codex, at some point in history, we don't know exactly when, was restored. And the restorer came with a pen, and he traced over the letters. And my question was, when he traced over the letters, did he also add a cholam? Did he also add that O, the missing O? What Keith calls the cholam from heaven? That was my question. And when I looked under the microscope in infrared, I could see that the cholam was original, because it's with a different type of ink than the one who what's called re-inked it, who reinforced the ink. There was one exception, and this was amazing, Michael. In this one exception that I found, it had the original cholam, and then look, when the guy was doing it, when he was doing the re-inking, he wasn't using a microscope, right? And so he didn't always put the lines on the same place as the original lines. And so he went to put the cholam, the re-inker, put in the cholam, and it's slightly to the left of the original cholam. So when you look under the microscope, you can see here's the original cholam, and right next to it is the added cholam by the re-inker. And that was, to me, that was the definitive, that was incredible to me. That was one of the greatest moments of my life. that I was able to actually examine the Aleppo Codex, the Leningrad Codex, not Cairo Codex, the prophets, Leningrad Codex, Aleppo Codex, Damascus Crown, and Sassoon 1053, and every one of them I was able to verify that the Cholam is really there, and the Leningrad Codex, which had the big question mark for me, was that a later scribe who added that in? The answer was definitively no. Usually the re-inker didn't bother with the vowels. He certainly didn't bother with the Cholam there of the name, but in one instance he did, and he put it right next to it. It's pretty close, right? But you can see with the microscope, there's two Cholams, one superimposed next to the other. Definitive 100%, you can't say this was added by a later scribe.
Nehemia, take us back, if you will, to the beginning. Because this kind of intensity, what you have invested in this research, this is something that is locked inside of you. It is at a level that I've never met anyone who has had this kind of detail, this kind of drive to be able to prove out the truth of this. Where did it all start, and where does it bring you to this day to have this in your hands?
Look, Michael, it really started for me when I started to study the name, and I felt that, or I've been taught at Hebrew University that we don't know the true vowels. And I felt like I was Moses being cast out into the wilderness in the movie The Ten Commandments, where Charlton Heston, which is with his beautiful bald head, he said, "Moses, I commend you to your Hebrew God who has no name." And I felt like that I was Moses out in the wilderness, not knowing the true pronunciation of the name of Yehovah. And I didn't even know. I knew it was Yud-He-Vav-He. Was it Yahweh? Was it Yehvah? Was it Yehovah? Could have been any. I have no idea. And there I was sitting at the Hebrew University Bible Project on 9/11, and I found a place where it had the full vowels. And then I looked and found another place where it had a full vowels. And this coincided with the planes flying into the towers. I've shared this in the I think it's called This Tower That Still Stands in the Open Door series and my book Shattering the Conspiracy of Silence. Mm-hmm. For me, Michael, that wasn't the end. It wasn't that God has now revealed to me his name is Yehovah. You must obey what I teach. Not at all. I want to know the truth. I discovered something on that day. Now I want to go hunt down those manuscripts, see them with a microscope to verify with solid, irrefutable facts that those symbols that I found in the photographs are actually there. I showed you one where the photograph has a dot and it's not there in the actual manuscript. Mm-hmm. It was a Leningrad Codex. So where it's brought me today is in a sense, it's, look, I talked about how I went with Reggie White to see the Aleppo Codex. We got to see it for, 2 minutes, and we weren't able to touch it, and we certainly weren't able to examine it. And I got to sit down for 9 hours and examine it. And I believe this is an answer to my prayer, and I believe an answer to prayers of tens of thousands of people who have been asking for answers, who want definitive proof, who have heard the naysayer say, well, maybe that cholam was added. Okay, let's find out if that's true. To me, this has been a verification. It wasn't that God revealed this to me and the story's over. No. God allowed me to find information, and now I was able to hunt down and track down and trace down the truth and verify his word that it's true.
Yeah. Well, Nehemia, there is other research that you've done, and it's not in the ancient Hebrew text. It's in the Greek text, the Greek text of the Gospel of John. It was it's a situation that I ran into in my preparation for doing the chronological Gospels, that you and John Lorquette brought this information on a deep scale for Passover a couple years ago. And now you have been able to get in with the photographs, and I want you to share that with the people, because this is something that is near and dear to my heart, because I could not do the chronological Gospels. I couldn't make it fit without this information that you found.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd like you to come back and share that with
I would love
everyone
to
if
do
you
that.
want. Okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is all the time that we've got right now. But Nehemia is going to come back, and he's going to take us into Lambeth Palace Museum, and he's got a treat for us this next time. He talked a little bit about it before, but now you're going to see the photographs for what Scribner says the most important minuscule manuscript in the Lambeth Palace Museum, and you're going to see why it is the most important and why it really helps us to understand that Eusebius fed us a line with the 3.5-year ministry, and that Yeshua's ministry was just as he said it was, and that I'm going to let Nehemia tell more of the story when we come back again on Shabbat Night Live. This is the cutting edge of biblical research. This has reached its pinnacle that no other generation could see or know or be able to decipher these things. And as Nehemia said, was it 4 of the 6 most important manuscripts, Hebrew manuscripts in the world? He has now been able to inspect them, and no other person on the planet has no other scholar, at least, probably no other person on the planet has been able to have access to these things, and you have. So
What a blessing.
So we see the Almighty is still working, and this is where I saw Nehemia go outside of the box that I had made for the Almighty, and that I saw the Holy Spirit work with him, direct him, lead him in, continue to lead him in ways that nobody else on the planet has been able to be led, because they neither had the expertise nor had the Holy Spirit open the doors for them to see what Nehemia is now able to bring to the world. So join us again next time for Shabbat Night Live. So Shabbat Shalom, Torah fans, Shavua Tov. Have a good week, and we'll see you right back here next week for the rest of the story, Shabbat Night Live. Shalom, Torah fans. Give this video a thumbs up and share it with a friend. Tap the subscription button and the bell icon, and I promise to update weekly with in-depth biblical research. Be sure to download the new michaelrood.tv app for both mobile and home devices for even more commercial-free content.